And you could say that the identity and function of this infernal guardian Dakini is like a rich, rich vein of ore, of Terma wisdom. It's a vein of the Terma treasure ore that I have not tapped until this moment. The richness of the Terma of Gaia awakening is totally inexhaustible. Don't know if you've noticed that yet, but maybe some of you are getting on to it. And one proof I would offer of that inexhaustibility is the way that everything that is contained in the Vajrayana and Dzogchen teachings and in the highest yoga tantras of Tibetan Buddhism is neatly packed inside Planetary Tantra. And all you have to have is the open sesame key to open any one of those elements, like I just opened this one by pronouncing the name, and bingo, out comes a treasure trove of Dakini wisdom that is relevant here and now, alive here and now, applicable here and now, but only within the framework of Planetary Tantra, within the Gaian tantric perspective, yes. As far as I'm concerned, I can plainly say that all this Dakini lore and this ritual and metaphysical material, as long as it remains within the framework of its Tibetan origin, is completely obsolete, useless, pointless, and futile. It's completely over. There is no further use for that format anymore, because everything that can be found in that format can be reinvented through Planetary Tantra into something far greater than it ever was. And this is what I do. I take the liberty to do this. I don't ask anybody's permission, although there's a chance, it's probable that I got permission to do this from a certain Tibetan Lama. So I'll tell you that little anecdote, by the way, just in case I haven't, recounted it before, just by way of advancing this little talk I'm presenting. But then I really want to get to the essential matter here. The Mahamudra sky in Tantra Outbound comes with a series of footnotes, just as do all the poems in both series of the 8 conversions. And so the line, "Fool and wise man had a conversation," carries this commentary. Allusion to the Turton session with a Tibetan Lama of high accomplishment, possibly Dudjom Rinpoche, or an unnamed Kargyu master, in Santa Fe, New Mexico, sometime in the early 1980s. On that fine occasion, the Turton, to his embarrassment, had nothing to say for himself and nothing to ask. The best he could do was to offer the master a riddle in the form of a joke. If a fool and a wise man have a conversation, who learns the most? According to the Turton's Shakti, I'm referring to something that happened in October of 2008 in Amsterdam, the Rinpoche's response to that joke was a silent 22-minute download of mind treasure courteously deposited in the clouds for future retrieval. So much for irreverence. So that might seem like a rather enigmatic or elusive commentary to some people. But in plain English, it refers to an actual interview I had with a Tibetan master in the early 80s. It came to me through a friend, an astrological client of that time, who called herself Dachin. She had taken a Tibetan name. She was an American heiress from Kentucky. Anyway, she set up this meeting with me, half an hour in her house, in an upper floor of her beautiful house in Santa Fe, and I really didn't know what to do. I thought, well, I guess I'll just go, but I don't see the point. And as the commentary explains, I sat down with this character who, when I look back, reminds me of a great buffalo. Had a big hulk of a body and a particular kind of face, which seems to have been exactly the appearance of Dudjom Rinpoche, who was, as far as I know, the supreme head of the Nyingma order, and no less than that. Of course, in subsequent years, I tracked down Dachin, tried to find out who that actually was, and she couldn't recall. So I can't be sure that it was Dudjom Rinpoche, but I do believe that he had visited Santa Fe or visited the United States in the early 80s before his death in that decade, sometime later on. In any case, whoever it was, I sat there with this Tibetan creature on my right, and I said, I guess I was supposed to, ask the master questions. So the first question I said was, would you like a joke? Because I didn't know if he spoke English well enough to get a joke, And he nodded and smiled, so I said, if a fool and a wise man have a conversation, who learns the most? And guess what his response was? He smiled. One of those serene, Tibetan Lama smiles right out of the mug book. He smiled. He looked at me very, very calmly. And then he turned his gaze to the window of the room that we were sitting in. And he just gazed out the window. Didn't say a thing. And so I sat there to his left, and I gazed out the window with him. Now, this window had the shape of a rectangular shape at the bottom, and then it came up and it formed a dome. So it had a kind of beehive shape. And I would say that at the base it was about a yard wide and maybe yard and a half high. It was small, and it looked out at the beautiful October skies of Santa Fe, which were a perfect turquoise blue with big white cumulus clouds floating through the sky. Typical fall day. Impeccable fall day in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And we both sat there, very quiet, not saying a word. There was no word said. And we were looking out in unison. We were looking together, eye to eye, you could say, at this window. And it was very relaxed. There was no tension in the room. I didn't feel embarrassed or uncomfortable because I had nothing to say, nor was I troubled by the fact that he was not saying anything to me. And after a certain period of time, bear in mind that we had probably passed, 5 minutes or so just in the beginning when I asked the question, or sitting down or getting comfortable with each other. So in the remaining 25 minutes, an interesting progression ensued in my mind. After a while, I had that experience of my mind prompting my mind. I don't know if you know what that's like, but it's as if you have what Castaneda called the voice of seeing speaking to you. The voice of seeing is a voice in your mind that comments on what's happening in your mind or in your field of perception in a way that seems curiously neutral and detached from your ordinary mode of thinking. So this voice was indicating to me, gee, look at those clouds floating by out there. Wow, yeah, I know those clouds. Cumulus clouds, prairie boats, right? Flat-bottom prairie boats. Big heaps of whipped cream floating across the sky. How many times had I seen them? How many times have I contemplated that sublime beauty during the years I lived in Santa Fe? Oh, wow. Nice vision at 7,000 feet high in the Rocky Mountains. Lovely, lovely vision. Not nice, which means nescient or ignorant, but lovely, enticing vision. So I found that my concentration was drawn more and more to the clouds, and they were moving at a considerable rate. It was as if that beehive-shaped window was like a portal out to the sky, and the clouds were moving across the portal, the porthole, from left to right at a noticeable speed. And so, again, we get probably halfway through the session, and my mind, or wherever it is inside my mind, that is advising my mind and advising my attention, is saying, yeah, well, those clouds, remind me of something. What is that? Look at them. They're all kind of the same. Usually now, they're different. You know, every cumulus cloud, every prairie boat is a little bit different, but I'm noticing as the procession of the clouds goes across the space of the window, I'm noticing that they start to look more and more the same, as if it's the same cloud that keeps going from left to right across my field of vision as defined by this dome-shaped window in an adobe wall. Well, just look at those clouds. They don't look like clouds, really. What do they remind me of? They're reminding me of something. So I look and the clouds go by. The unnamed Lama, or Tulku, or wherever he was, Rinpoche, sitting beside me, not saying a word, but holding his gaze with my gaze. We gazed as one creature. And sure enough, the commentary in my mind suggested to me a Tibetan stupa. Oh yeah, you know what those places are like. Well, first of all, they're kind of shaped like the window, aren't they? That conical or beehive dome shape. And what do you see when you go inside a Tibetan stupa? Well, you see that you look up and you look around in a full circle of 360 degrees, and lo and behold, the sky is painted there with bodhisattvas, dakinis, and various other entities of Tibetan iconography floating in the blue, right? Pretty much the same kind of blue outside today, a little bit duller maybe. And also, there are clouds. Clouds like a decorative decor of the meditative scene. So, we're deep into the session now, and nobody's saying a word, and the commentary of my mind upon itself is saying, yeah, well, you know, maybe they aren't clouds, because look at how uniform they are. Every time that one goes by and disappears off the right edge of the window, another one comes, emerges from the left edge, and it looks exactly like the one that went across before. But you can't really compare the two because they only fill the window one at a time. But there's a definite sequence, and there's a definite steady rotation. And hey, wait a minute. I have a feeling that the clouds outside in the sky are not rotating. The room is rotating. And I'm inside some kind of stupa that's on an axis that is rotating from right to left, causing the sky outside to appear to rotate from left to right. But those aren't clouds in the sky, they're just painted clouds, which proves again that I must be in a stupa, right? So there I was, in a stupa, not in a state of stupefaction, but in a stupa, sitting there in absolute profound silence. And so by the time it came to the end of the session, because all I could get, like anyone else, was half an hour, and Dachin came up the stairs and whispered a word saying the time was up, I was completely enwrapped in the impression that he and I were sitting in a stupa and the clouds were painted clouds. And what were we doing? Watching this circular procession of painted clouds in an immobile universe, sitting in a room that was spinning, and the axis of the spin was between his mind and mine. You get it? The axis of spin was the combination of his mind and mine. Well, years later, 2008, I was knocking around Amsterdam one beautiful October day with a particular Shakti OTM who was with me when I received the term of Gaia Awakening. And we were sitting by the Athenaeum, which is a square near a canal. I think it's the Single in Amsterdam. The Athenaeum bookstore. Athenaeum. And I recounted this episode to her. And she got up and went to take a whiz. And when she came back to the table outside, she was literally staggering. Now, I'm not sure if that had to do with what we were drinking, because we weren't drinking that much. But she was in a definite state of drunkenness. And she sat down and she said, I got it. And I said, what? What did you get? She said, you got a direct download of mind mandate transmission from that Tibetan Lama. I said, yeah, you think so? He said, yeah. I said, well, I reflected for a moment. I said, well, sounds reasonable to me. Sounds very feasible, right? And listen, if it was, as I suspect, Dudjom Rinpoche, the supreme Lama of the Nyingma order at that time, then perhaps it wouldn't be too wild to say that he absolutely downloaded or transmitted to me the total content of his wisdom at my pleasure.